Dave and I do not come from a blended family, so we don't know.
Talking about you, Grandma Paige and Grandpa Dave, and Avery goes, well, she doesn't want me to call her Grandma. She told me to call her Paige.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. TLC is being accused of making kids cry.
And I think it turned out so nice.
News at 11. This is what TLC is known for, right? So last night there was a new episode of The Blended Bunch, and the episode was a doozy. I don't know what it is about this show, but they really are going for the full effect of trying to make kids look unhappy, making kids cry, and also creating scenes where they're discussing their grief. And in last night's episode, we saw Rachel, who's Amy's mother, come into town, which was actually sweet. Rachel seems like a really nice mom, very enthusiastic as a grandmother, loves her grandchildren. The grandchildren absolutely loved her, and they were very happy to see her because they felt like they had a piece of their mom with them. But it brought a lot of drama that I'm not quite sure how much of this was real or how much of this was fabricated. But after I saw the episode, I was like, this seems so weird. So what happened in the episode? Rachel comes into town, and Erica admits that she struggles to compare herself to Amy because Amy was known as the woman that was born to be a mother. She also is very apprehensive with Rachel just because it's a brand new relationship between her and Rachel, and she doesn't want to like make her feel bad. And then her mom, Paige, there's like some issues between her parents and Rachel that I don't know if it's true or not, but you know, they make it seem like her parents are staying away while Rachel is in town, like intentionally, like she doesn't want to be around Rachel, or like there's some ulterior motive.
Every time I come to Utah, it would be great to see Paige and Dave, and I kind of expect to see them. They never come.
And it ultimately goes down at the apple orchard where they're picking apples, and they have to have this like conversation where Rachel has a heart-to-heart with Paige and asks her like, why don't you ever come around? Why are you not liking me? Like that kind of thing. But she was like way nicer about it. And Paige basically said that she didn't want to intrude on her, and she didn't want to like make it feel like she couldn't spend time with her grandchildren because she lives in Virginia, and now that Paige lives in Utah, she gets to see the grandkids all the time. And so she wanted to make sure that Paige could have that time with her grandkids without having to like fight for their attention. And Rachel made the sort of the assessment that like that's fine, she understood that, but it's also important for the kids to be to be able to be as a whole family and to blend the families together. Then there was this whole thing about grandma and grandpa. So apparently last episode there was this thing about Bexley not being able to call them, asking if he could call Paige and her husband grandma and grandpa, and they said you can just call us by our names. And Rachel brought that up and was like, well, why did you tell them? And I guess they're very upset that you said that they could only call you by your first names. And her parents basically said that, you know, they didn't really know what to say, so they just told them to call them by their first names if that's what made them comfortable. But then they also brought up that Emma was really unhappy with the fact that the other kids would call them grandma and grandpa because it's not their grandma and grandpa. So then Spencer kicks in and is basically like, you can't just give Emma what she wants. There's four other children here that care, blah, blah, blah. And eventually it just turns out that nobody cares about if they're called grandma and grandpa. The whole thing is a big to-do about nothing, and apparently everything gets resolved. But it's later that some things happen that get a little bit questionable, and I've noticed this throughout the last 2 episodes, is that they do a lot of planting, and I know how these TLC shows are run, and it's a lot of production giving families ideas about what to talk about, setting up scenes, and then letting them sort of go with it. So they give them a topic and then they talk about it. Well, there was a scene where Rachel hands over a photo of Amy with her oldest son, Brayden. And she presents this photo to Brayden and basically says, like, I made this for you, and I really hope that it'll give you opportunity to be with your mother, And then Brayden is like bawling his eyes out, and then he sees the photo of him with his mother, and he's crying so hard, and he talks about how much he misses his mom and he wants to be with his mom, and that, you know, being with grandma is the best thing because it's like being with his mom.
That's why it's hard for me to say goodbye to her, because it's like a piece of my mom.
So I was like, well, that's weird. Like, why are we always like trying to get people crying? Like, Rachel's crying, he's crying, and Rachel cried a lot the entire time they were there. I mean, she asked them if they would move to Virginia. They said no. She felt like they had taken the kids from her, and that they took the last part of her life with Rachel away from Amy with her when they took the kids and uprooted them to Utah. So there's all these weird things that are happening with Rachel. So then she gives them this picture, and then they plant a tree, which I thought was really weird. First of all, it's sweet to plant a tree for your loved one. I think it's a great memorial, but they're renting this place. So I think that was odd. But Spencer's whole idea was like, if we plant this tree and it's called the Amy, which means first love, according to Spencer, they could plant it, and then the kids could go to this tree at any time and like remember their mom.
Neat thing about this tree, it's also called a first love tree.
Aww.
And again, people are crying. Spencer's crying, the kids are crying, everyone's crying. So I was like super weirded out by this, and I was like, what is going on here? Oh, and then like let's throw in the wrench that Erica's brother Quinn talks to Erica about how, you know, she's feeling, and Erica admits that she's having anxiety and that she can't tell Spencer that she's having an anxiety because she's in such a new relationship. And she says that Spencer does pull his weight, and Quinn's like, no, he doesn't. And there's just sort of this like back and forth of Quinn being like, why doesn't Spencer know? Why isn't Spencer asking? Why isn't Spencer doing this? Like, Quinn is very, 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 very critical of Spencer. And I think he's coming from like a very like big brother sort of place. And the big brothers can be very loving, and they also can be extremely overbearing. And so I have a big brother. I definitely know how that goes in terms of like them being extremely protective. I also know that generally big brothers just have their best interests of their siblings at heart. So there's that too. After the episode aired, I was like, what is going on here? Like, this seems so weird. Like, first off, the stuff between Paige and Rachel felt off. The picture felt weird. The tree felt weird. And so I actually just reached out to Quinn, who has been very active in my comments on Instagram, and I sent him a DM, and I was like, what is going on with all this like crying on the show? Like, are these like authentic? Like, why is there so much crying? Like, why is there so many things dedicated to the grief? And he basically said that Rachel did not make the photo of Amy and Brayden. That was something that TLC did. Now, he did say like that would have been something that Rachel would have done. Like, he said that they do things like that for the kids, where they get them photos or they do special things for them. But he said TLC gave her that photo and then asked her to present it to Brayden. So that's like gross to me, because it's like you're doing this thing knowing that it's going to make Brayden cry, knowing it's going to make Rachel cry, and knowing it's going to make for good TV, but it actually is, in my opinion, exploiting the children's grief. Like, the adults have a choice to be on the show, the kids do not. Like, they can ask the kids if they want to be on the show, but a kid does not understand the full magnitude of what it means to be on reality television. So just like that, I said, well, what about the tree? Was that TLC's idea too? And he said, yes, like TLC got them a tree and told them to plant the tree. And again, making the kids cry. So I'm like, what is the point here? And he also said that the whole situation between Rachel and his parents was completely like misconstrued, and that it's not as it was not what it seemed at all. There wasn't any drama. His parents are just very cognizant of other people's time, and they do not like to intrude on other people's space, and do like to respect grandparents having time with kids so that they don't have to all like fight for each other's time. And I was like, okay, I understand that. But the way that it was painted is that like her parents are bad and Rachel is good. And I think, you know, I think her parents have done so much for Erica and Spencer that it gets sort of lost in all of this, like, they won't call me grandma, they won't do this, they don't do that. It almost seems like they're trying to paint Erica's parents as like the villains of the grandparents, which editing can do. I don't think that there's anything nefarious going on with these people. I think they love their daughter. I think they went to go help their daughter, and they want to be there for her daughter and their grandkids. So there's that aspect too. But when I actually posted on my Instagram that TLC was effectively planting things on Instagram, like planting things for trauma, people were really upset. So I said this. I said, apparently TLC is staging all of these grief scenes for views. Erica's brother, Quinn, let me know that TLC bought this photo and asked Rachel to give the photo to Braden. The tree was also a TLC ad where they planted the tree in honor of Amy. The photos of the parents that were passed were added by TLC, and the talk about, they also did a talk about SEX last night, which was so exploitive, not necessary. I didn't even want to talk about it, honestly, because it's so unnecessary, but that was also added by TLC. I said the disagreement between Rachel and Erica's parents was also apparently a plant by TLC. Quinn says his parents just do not like to impose, and that's all there is to it. Well, here's what some of you guys says. This infuriates me. When it's adults, you're pitting against each other, it's one thing. But grieving children, they can't even process any of this without cameras or interference, just shameful on TLC's part. And then someone else said, this is disgusting. Someone said, I am speechless. I started tearing up when he started crying. This is just beyond wrong. I'm a grown woman and still have a hard time dealing with the parents being gone. And this is very recent for them. Plus, they are children. This doesn't need to be televised. I'm pissed seeing this. And there was so many of these comments. This was by far one of the most commented on posts I've had in a while. At the end of the day, Erica's siblings have been in my comments a lot. Quinn and her sister both have been in comments. And then she has another brother, Spencer. So the family is upset, really upset by some of this kind of stuff. And I understand that it helps the views, but it also feels generally very exploitive. And I think in general, Spencer, according to Quinn, was wanting money for the show. So, at what point are you're selling your child's trauma for money, and then TLC is exploiting that? It's partially TLC's fault, but it's the parents that are all going along with it. And it just seems really gross to me. I don't like that aspect of it. That's a part of it's a part of the TLC shows that drive me bonkers. And then when you add kids to the mix and you make them cry, it makes me feel horrible. My son is 8, and I would be hell no if someone ever tried to do that to my son. I'm not gonna make my son cry for views. I'm not gonna make him feel bad. I'm not gonna add trauma to his life. I do not understand parents that do this, and I don't understand the networks that are okay with this. Just the talk about their bodies changing and having relationships. That was so unnecessary and did not need to be on TV, but TLC knows that it's good for ratings. So what are your thoughts knowing all of this information? I've got lots of tea from Quinn. He talks, and there's just a lot going on here. What do you think about all of this? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.